next guest that we're having here for you, speaking directly from Sweden, in Stockholm, Sweden, as a matter of fact, I'm thrilled to welcome my friend and book author and global innovation leader, Magnus Penker. Magnus is an internationally renowned thought leader on innovation, digitization, and business transformation. He serves as the CEO of Innovation 360. And just last week, check this out, last week, his book, Play Bold, was on the Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling list. And we have him with us here today. I'm so excited about that. He's a speaker in prestigious global forums and events, top-ranked international business and design schools, and a variety of associations and some of the world's largest companies. Mr. Penker has published several international books on innovation, and he is also still running the podcast Play Bold, where I have had the honor of being a guest in the past. So make sure you check it out. And Magnus, what a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you for sharing your expertise with nearly 2,000 of our global leaders in our community.
Oh, great to be here. Thank you, Jose. It's an honor. I'm live broadcasting from outside Stockholm in Sweden. I just relocated from New York, spending a few years there. It's almost like being at home. I also guess we have quite many international people in the audience as well. So hello to everybody in all time zones. So today I'm going to speak about how to cope with really turbulent times, getting back in the saddle and make things happen. I call it Play Bold. And the Play Bold idea is actually about culture, attitude, way of working, capabilities. A lot of things goes into that concept. And my idea is to walk you through that today and provide you and equip you with what you need to get back in the saddle and create your new fantastic future. Anyone can learn to innovate. Anyone can train to win. Anyone can be bold anywhere in the world. That is basically the concept. And if you have a look at the book, Play Bold, you will see very provocative titles. Actually, in matter of fact, the whole Play Bold concept is provocative. It's so provocative that Philip Kotler, that wrote the foreword, he said, wow, this is counterintuitive. I had to read the book. So the idea is to base the book on the largest innovation management database in the world that we created with Innovation 360. We have more than 5,000 profiled companies, and we don't talk about an overall scraping from the internet. We talk about in-depth data on how you organize, culture, strategy, and so forth. We use that together with peer-reviewed thinking over the last 100 years, and we boiled it down to a few key insights, and I'm going to share those key insights with you today. So, of course, I can't cover everything, but I will do a few deep dives to bring you on a journey. I've been fortunate. The book hit #1 on new releases in sustainable development, comparative economics, and econometrics already the first month. And from there, it moved on and climbed on different various lists. So why am I doing this? Why am I participating in this great conference? The idea and the vision we have with Innovation 360 Group that I founded now 6 years ago is to contribute to that at least one of the UN 17 sustainability goals will be solved by 2030. I am aware of this is not a big thing in the US, but I'm also seeing a great movement in the US and North America. We need to get the shit together, excuse the French, We can't just continue and kill our customers and kill the markets and kill the planet. We need to fix things. And the 17 sustainability goals, they are pretty well articulated. There is an alternative set of goals from Singularity University. There was 7 from the beginning, now 8. They are basically in the same direction. And most people, they do agree. By 2030, we need to fix water, poverty. We need to fix health. We need to fix a lot of things. And to restore the planet, to basically host more habitants. I think it would be pretty cool to have 20 billion customers. I would really like that. So the idea is basically we'd play bold, and the whole idea behind Innovation 360, grow the pie, then take the pie. Shrinking the pie and killing your customers is a very bad alternative. So talking about that, I have a great friend from Hollywood. We did quite many projects together. He told me on a flight to Malaysia once that, you know, Magnus, it's the only 2 stories in the world, very typically Hollywood. Okay, Jack, tell me more. He told me that, you know, either you go on a journey or a stranger come to town. It's your decision. Either you're the loser, getting all, you know, things thrown at you, or you take control of your own life. It's actually a matter of what you want to do with your life. So when the pandemic hit, I was living in New York. I guess we have a good number of people from New York on this call, and also LA. It was pretty bad back then. And I saw this tweet, and I saved this tweet. I think it's a great tweet, actually. 26th of March, the first blood gathering organization in the US collect plasma from COVID-19 patients to use as a possible treatment for the disease. It did work, by the way. It's not super scalable, but it did work. And where did they learn this? Actually, from the Spanish flu, 100 years ago. Every 100 years back, until the 1500th century, we had a pandemic. And it will come again. This time, it will most likely take 100 years. It will most likely go much faster. We need to change the way of working. We need to change the way of socializing. We need to stop actually violating Mother Nature. It's a lot of things we need to do. But the story here, I share that with you because it's either the virus happened to you or you happened to the virus. That's the whole idea. And that is actually inherited in the US soul. So go back to that, go back to the roots, go back to the DNA, go back to the founding fathers and ask yourself, what can you do? And a great story from the World War II is that there were a metal shortage during World War II, and 1942 citizens sourced their homes, farms, businesses. Kids even handed in their toys and donated metals. It was a metal shortage. It was a big crisis. The US couldn't defend themselves against Japan. They needed more metals. And they were very, very innovative. And they came up with absolutely crazy ideas, getting people to melt down whatever they had at home. Again, there are only 2 stories. This is my story from New York. You can see me on the right-hand side. And it's funny, when we're going to show this kind of pictures in 20, 30, 40 years from now, people will think that it is made up. But this was how it was. And you did actually get a penalty if you didn't have the mask. So this particular day, it was during the East River. I had a walk, and then I walked to the bank. I had to go to the bank office. There was one thing I couldn't do remotely. So I talked to the bank manager, and I had to go through different securities, of course, to reach him to my appointment. And I asked him for, 3 months earlier, if I looked like this, what have happened then? And he told me, we would shut you. you wouldn't stay. You would be absolutely dead. So now it's absolutely normal. And it's actually looking at like the left-hand side here. We are very adaptable as creatures. But again, it's not always good to adapt. Sometimes we need to pose us one single question. What do we want to do with our life and our businesses? that is very central. And if we just adapt and do weird things, we might even continue with that after the pandemic. So we need really to rethink. And one of my idols, actually, I have two idols. One is Joseph Schumpeter from the 1800th century. The other one is Lady Gaga. I can tell more about that another time. But Joseph Schumpeter, he said famously 100 years ago that entrepreneurs combine existing elements in new ways and create destruction and build up something better, more valuable out of that. So this is central idea in the Play Bold, that entrepreneurs combine things, they create destruction and they rebuild and they do it better. And this is what's happening right now. Therefore, the lessons learned from Joseph Schumpeter and the last 100 years is very suitable right now. We are actually in the point where we have a sudden collapse, and it is so many companies that is going under Chapter 11 or bankruptcy in other countries. So the question is, what is your story? Think about that. And if you don't do anything with what I give you today, please, at least with sugar on the top, write down your story. It will tremendously help you. We're going into new normal. I created this picture a year ago, and it actually seems to be spot on. It will be pockets of protectionisms, revised healthcare policies, new way of working, new superclusters, rebuilding supply chain. Panama is just an example. Electrification, automation boost, and the electrification part is more disruptive than the automation. It's absolutely changing way of working, way of assembling, way of producing, way of consuming. It's an absolutely game changer. So if you believe that automation and AI is disruptive, wait for the electrification. We are in many projects working with electrification, and the magnitude is unbelievable. So innovation is central to build the culture of innovation, the capability for innovation, the leadership for innovation, the structure of innovation. Without that, you can't cope with what's happening right now. And 90% of all executives agree to that. However, only 6% are satisfied. And our data, it shows clearly that only 10% have the capability in place, but 78% invest quite much money, but in the wrong things, in the wrong way, at the wrong time. And the problem is not the lack of ideas, absolutely not. All of you have a lot of them. It's about getting where, why, what, how, and also the who. I will share with you 5 main blockers that we identified among all our companies. We also published a peer-reviewed study, an IEEE. And I walk them through one by one with you guys and bring this home. Just doing this will help you. The first one is silos. And you can see this cartoon here. I don't have time to see any crazy salesman. I have a battle to fight. Okay. But if you look a little bit to the right, you see machine gun. Maybe that would be handy. Very typical. You are busy, being busy, and that is breaking companies. You need to reach out to people around you, maybe even other industries, to figure it out. The second one is actually the lack of faith in your objectives, in your goals. You need to believe in the goals. You need to be able to break them down into tangible actions. And then you have the third one, to link to a higher purpose. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. We knew this for quite some time. Still, we believe in quarterly capitalism, and it's a poison. It's breaking systems. We need to get back to believe. Then you will grow the pie and making better business. And then you can have your quarterly reports and make all the money. But it doesn't work the other way around. It's well proven in a lot of research done over the last decade, and it's very clear shown in our data too, that this is hindering effectively any kind of change in innovation. Then we have the next one, to to dare to fail. And the best quote I have is from Michael Jordan. I missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeeded. That's the attitude. That's what brings you to the top. You need to dare to fail, but do it fast, do it cheap, and don't do the same mistake twice. The next one is actually about uncertainty, and this is pretty cool. I have the helicopter that just landed on Mars, and I used this picture long before they landed. Could you imagine anything more uncertain than riding a helicopter on Mars? I would say that's the perfect example of uncertainty. Apparently, you can deal with that. Why do we claim in the boardroom, I need an ROI and I need to hire some expensive consultants to do that job for me? The only thing you do is recreating yesterday, and it will fail, and it will fail big, and it will be expensive because the market is changing. When you finally hit the market, it's the wrong timing, it's the wrong things for the wrong price. It's absolutely meaningless. You need to accept and deal with uncertainty instead. I'm very proud to work with the former CTO of NASA, John Sess. He has 18 years served as the CTO of NASA. He's one of my guys in the New York office. We deal with this in client assignments all the time. And you know what? It is possible. So you can find a lot in the book, or you can also, if you want, to reach out and we can have a chat about that. But you need to learn to accept it and learn from it. And basically, this boils down to the S-curve concept, where you work, where you are today, you get birth, you grow, you mature, you fade away. And you can extend that by improvements, but you can't leapfrog to the next S-curve with traditional methods. For that, it calls for a culture, capability structure, and leadership and strategy for innovation. Otherwise, you can't do it because you will jump based on random insights at best case. Worst case, you don't even have any insights. So you need to plan for leapfrogging and to build up the upcoming S-curves. And this is like riding a motorcycle, to take a comparison. If you're riding a motorcycle and you also compete in that, when you come to a curve, you adapt the speed, you balance the forces, you take the curve, that's incremental innovation, but you also plan for the corners. And actually, these go quite fast, and you don't know what will be around the corner. You don't know who will be around the corner, but you need to plan for different outcomes and be very prepared. Then when you're through the curve, you gear up and accelerate fast. That's disruption. I typically slice this down into horizons. So where the first horizon is here and now, where you work with the known. You will have cash in return. That's where we are comfortable. But then in the third horizon, you don't know, and the return is insights. What you could do. That's the feeder into the H2, where you work with the hypotheses and prototyping, where you acquire new competences and capabilities and build for commercial success in H1. If you structure like that, you will take the game and win it. This picture is a more high resolution picture on how you create feeders. You have push and pull feeders, creating big ideas out of them by combining them using a technique called grounded theory. By the way, used by CIA frequently. They caught Osama bin Laden by that, but using that technique. It's very powerful. You move that into the box of level of uncertainty, where you reduce the uncertainty. If you decide that uncertainty is H1, meaning it's completely known, you just move it into the development operation and the DevOps or the development process or whatever you call it. That's the institutionalized part of it. That's normally where you're not weak. If it's very unknown in the H3, you do experiments, putting up hypotheses, reduce the level of uncertainty into H2, where you do piloting and prototyping, and then you move that into testing in tiers, near testing, field testing, market testing. This way you reduce the uncertainty, which means that you push forward things that will win with less risk, less cost, in a faster speed, and you free up working capital, and everybody's happy, except your competitors. So my 7 steps that I would like to give to you guys that you can follow. And please, if you have any question, just make a note, because in a few minutes, Josie will step in and take Q&A, and that's normally a very appreciated part. So start with the first step. Ask yourself, why does you exist as an organization? What is the reason? If you can answer that question, you will be much better off. One great example is Black & Decker. I guess you know about they're doing handy tools like drilling machines. So the question is, what do they sell? Well, if you ask the CEO of Black & Decker, he will tell you immediately, we do not sell drills. We sell quarter-inch holes. And this is important because a Black & Decker drilling machine will not last. It's not high quality, but it does the job to a very nice price. Otherwise, you need to buy a professional machine that will last for 1,000 years for an amateur, and for a professional, maybe a year or two. That doesn't make sense. You have to answer this very simple question. And then you have to identify good examples within your organization. We typically work with 360 mappings and assessments to understand the scene. If you can find a few good examples internally, you can actually amplify them and work with them. You can, in the same way, systematically identify and assessing blockers. What's blocking you? I just gave you 5 examples. We have identified 66 capabilities that could either be blocked or amplified based on the last 100 years of current thinking, collecting data. We can benchmark, we can give very in detail advice around that. You will find a lot of that in the book too. So why do I bring it up? Because it's possible to assess what's blocking you, remove it, what should be amplified, and the best way of doing that is to find a good example. Say, hey, let's do more of this. Then another thing, it's a pretty good idea to actually work in an ecosystem. To kill your neighbor is a very bad idea. Instead, you should collaborate. Let me give you one tangible example. 5G is tremendously successful. Why? Well, it is Ericsson from my home country, together with Nokia from my neighbor country, Finland. They rule the 5G market worldwide. 2 small, tiny, small, unbelievable small. It's not even as many people in just New York living in both these countries. They rule the 5G in the world. Huawei, they decided they don't want to be a part of creating that standard, and that has been very expensive. So I'm sorry if anyone from Huawei on this call. Bad luck. So it is smart to work with your enemies and keep them close to define and set a standard. This is old Sun Tzu from 4,500 years ago. Reduce uncertainty by experimenting and study real behavior. Do not listening to your customer, do not listening to what people tell you because they don't know. People typically don't know what they do in the morning. They don't know what they're doing during the day. They just do it. Your job is to observe and learn. That way you will identify really, really interesting things. And just ask yourself, would you ask for iPhone 1 before it existed? Most likely not. Then you need to accelerate what you have at hand, because you need to make money. You need to create a blood circular, but don't fool yourself. It will have an end. Everything has an end. Your job is to maximize it and use that cash, or what I call store energy, and identify new upcoming S-curves, learn how they work, and make the perfect jump when the time is ready. That's your job. Then you will create a sustainable growth with more success and most likely with less waste, which is a very good thing today. There are quite many statistical evidence that this approach is working. This is one of the largest studies made every year from 2010 and until 2019 by PricewaterhouseCoopers, where they prove that working in this way I just described, first of all, just having an innovation strategy, you will actually grow 14% faster, earn 13% more money, and the market cap will be substantially higher, 19% higher. But if you also have a coherent innovation strategy, which means that you build the capability I'm talking about, you will do even 8% more growth and even 22% more profit. This is crazy to not do. So a way of doing that and how I approach it, it is actually to assess your capability, because the real problem is under the surface. It is the culture, it is the personas, it is the capabilities, it's the way of working. Assess it, put matrix on it, and get the job done. And just hiring a new CEO will not do the job. A new chief information officer, a new CTO, a new CEO, it will not help. You need to understand that an organization is a creature, a very complex one. You need to understand and uncover the autonomy of that creature. Then you can do some really good stuff. And just think about sport. You always work with training. You don't play match every day. If you ask a gold medal winner, they will tell you that immediately. Actually, I had the best sharpshooter in the world in one of my recent podcasts. And she was very clear on that point. And I also had another guy that had a call with one of the best soccer players in the world, together with a group of executives working in boards. And this soccer player, a Brazilian guy, without mentioning his name, he actually asked the executives that, when do you train board meetings? And they looked at him and said, what do you mean? Well, if I would play match every day, I would lose because I would chicken out. And those folks went home and resigned from all their board assignments except one. So they were from different companies and they all did the same. If you want to listen to that podcast, you can do that too. It's a good reason to actually think that you don't know. You need to figure it out, and that's your job. The positive news is it is possible. So guys, I am now ready to take some questions and also let my friend Jose back in picture.
I am excited to be back in the picture with Magnus. It's always a pleasure, Magnus. Fantastic. We obviously have tremendous alignment in these concepts. We have experienced this globally. And we have some good questions here from the audience for you, and more conversation to be had. So for those of you who are on the call right now, and I can see a list of all the people who are on the call or on the broadcast, ask your questions. You have an opportunity to ask directly to a current global thought leader of innovation about his practical experiences with these concepts and principles, powerful principles. So take advantage of it. I can see your questions coming through. I'm going to start with Anna Martinez here. Anna Martinez says, Magnus, I love this presentation. It was awesome, especially the innovation horizons. Very insightful. And I believe she is referring now to the innovation horizons when she asks the question, how do you change upwards? And she says from bottom to top in the org chart. And basically, when you go from Horizon 1 to Horizon 2 to Horizon 3, the question is, how do you change upwards? How do you go from Horizon 1 to Horizon 3? And maybe how do you engage leadership as you go over those horizons?
Yes, that's an interesting question. And let me put it this way: if you don't have an idea why you exist as an organization, it's game over. That's my simple answer. It starts on the top. You need to have a leadership that are servants and humble and open Otherwise, quit. It's impossible. It will block you. And if you have that, well, then your job is to support that by being very curious, prestigeless, looking for new ideas, and not being the devil's advocate. That is what's killing innovation and moving across the horizons. You also need to create an infrastructure with ideation platforms to tap into everybody's daily work. But just doing that and believe it will work, it's not sufficient. You need to have the culture in place and the encouraging leadership. And I would say, I don't really like the word humbleness, but openness, prestigeless, listening, and then you can be pretty hard anyway. But you need to start listening and also believe in what you do. I think that is a few key components.
Very much so, very much so. And following up on that, Magnus, next question has to do with what do you see from a governance perspective on these organizations that do it well, who are doing innovation at all three levels, if you will? If they're doing well, what kind of governance do they have in place?
They have a very clear governance model for innovation management. So typically, they use this Horizon model, but they can use also, there are other models on the market, but they very clearly assign in the portfolio what kind of project, what is the level of uncertainty, what is the expected outcome. Because by doing that, you can reduce the level of uncertainty, you can prioritize the resources allocated. So the governance model typically include resource allocation, expectation, and level of uncertainty, and you map the level of uncertainty to some sort of model, and based on that you can make decisions. It's basically like a sales funnel when you work with sales, starting with leads and ending with a close. It's nothing that is especially strange, actually. That's how you governance it. So you need to have a portfolio, and you need to have product selection methodology in place, and it needs to be built on real experiments and real hypotheses, and you need to weight them based on potential outcome, but also rate them based on the level of uncertainty.
Very well, Magnus. How do you manage the different expectations and perhaps the different approaches you must have for Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3 at the same time in the same organization? How do you manage that?
I would say, if I can answer that, I will have Nobel Prize. But what I can do, I can elaborate on it. There are three principles. Integrated, which means you do everything at the same time everywhere. Centralized, which means that you do a few things centralized, typically the H3 stuff, maybe H2. Decentralized, meaning that you do what you typically do centralized, but you're doing in 7 satellites. They have pros and cons. I have seen very few companies, and our data show very few companies that work across the horizons in the whole organization. What I'm seeing that is working at best, and I say at best because it's not the perfect solution, it is when you dedicate different satellites to different horizons, but also the different kind of strategic initiatives that you're focusing on. But then you need to make them work together, which is not always that easy. And sometimes you need central resources as well. So central resources is important because you can bring knowledge to the table. You might have better resources in terms of funding. But the disadvantage with centralized governance is that you might not have the same closeness to the market. So typically you mix centralized and decentralized, you assign it to different level of horizons and different strategic initiatives. That's typically how we do it. And then a lot of large corporations, it's very popular right now to work with spin-in and spin-out. And spin-in is normally never working, because if you acquire a company, statistics shows that 80% of all merger fail. And the spin-out, well, it might work, but then you have a problem when you should buy it back. So my best advice, a mix of centralized and decentralized innovation centers, and typically give them very clear strategic directions about the horizon and the kind of strategic initiatives.
Very good, very good. Those details and those intricacies are so interesting and so important. And and as you said, it's not very clear. It's not black and white because context matters. And I think the existing culture that you have, the resources that you have, so on and so forth, all those things matter. So it's about putting together the right combination for your organization.
Yes.
Now on that, there's a concept that you talked a lot about that I agree with. Confirmation bias for sure, because I have seen it in my own experiences and I think it's important. But ultimately, to accelerate innovation in the ecosystem, ideas are important, but what's more important is to identify the people who are willing to put their reputation behind ideas. And the same thing with methods, same thing with technologies. So it comes down to people and
Yep.
finding what I call the right people in your organization to work as amplifiers of innovation.
Yes.
And you talk about that, and I love that concept because we have converged for very different paths into that. If you can elaborate a little bit more for our audience, what does it mean to be an amplifier, and how do you find these people in your organization?
So a real example from the US, I can't tell you where. It's a pretty large manufacturing industry, and they are very confident. They do pretty cool stuff. It's very advanced, a lot of PhDs, many from MIT. So we did an assessment on them, and we typically do many assessments in many parts to try to compare and contrast. We suspected that the Indian site might actually be more geared to run radical innovation, or what many people refer to as disruptive innovation. So we need to package that quite carefully because we expect that we might get the backlash. And I can tell you they were not happy, but we did package it in a way where we could explain to them why and how come that the Indian company is always coming up with products that is actually successfully launched. Well, we can tell you why. This is why, and we could nail down the capability, the culture, the leadership. But if we haven't been able to quantify that, most likely they would react it and say no, because they didn't want it to happen. It's a pretty big thing if a US headquartered company is less innovative than an Indian site. It's not in the US DNA to accept that. But if you have figures on it, you have to. We have to step down, basically. So I would say that that's the reason why I started the Innovation 360 company as well, to be able to do this kind of things. Without figures, it's very hard. People deny things. And I think it boiled down to that. If you can identify with figures and showcase, and then you can dress it up in qualitative things like, okay, this is what I did, this is what I did. Because if you do it the other way around, they will say, yeah, but. But if you showcase figures, hard fact, and then you explain it with examples, it's hard to shoot down and you get an acceptance much easier. And the amplifiers, the idea with amplifiers is that if you want to change something in a culture, in a large corporation, people will say, we don't do that, or we tried it. But if you can point at someone in the same organization successfully doing something, it will be a role model, and you can accept that it is possible to do. So that's the idea. The blockers is more obvious, but it's also more negative. The amplifier is very positive and pretty easy to work with.
Love that, love that. And when you have you found in your experience some sort of correlation with the personal traits of these amplifiers? What kind of people they typically are? If there is anything that's kind of common and unique about them?
It is. I wasn't expecting that question, but it is. We have borrowed the framework of IDEO in Palo Alto. So we assess 10 personas. One of those are the hurdler. And if you would like to understand the hurdler, watch a show with the MacGyver. That's the hurdler. Doing anything with nothing. Those folks, they do exist. They live in a vacuum. They operate under the radar. They typically have a small team around them. They're getting away with doing things because they always deliver. But that's not how they create value. Then in the basement, now during the night shift or when they have time over, they do amazing things, but no one sees it. They never show it. And eventually, and this is a true story, a good friend of mine was the CTO of Ericsson in North America. For many years, he lived neighbor with Steve Jobs. They were friends. They hanged out together. And he was developing IP telephony for Ericsson. And this is a true story. And I also actually mentioned that not in the Play Bold, but in another book. He developed IP telephony under the radar. He was forbidden by Ericsson to do that. Guess if they were happy that when they found that he did it against all instructions and policies. Without that, Ericsson wouldn't. They would be in another space. And this is happening all the time.
That's a fantastic story, and then people may think that this is just an anecdote, and I can absolutely support and attest that working with over 30,000 excellence and innovation leaders, what you have just described is very, very common, especially in larger organizations. Specifically, there is one person that's really, I'll provide another anecdote on that. There's a person I've worked with who was a chief engineer in a very 100-year-old engineering company, very prestigious, 14,000 engineers around the world. And this person, I remember, was considered to be incredibly smart, but can't get anything done. And that was kind of the perception that people quietly would have about this person. It was incredible when I got to meet this individual and see how bright he was and all the ideas that he had. And there is some truth to that. They almost had too many ideas and not enough execution discipline on some of those ideas. Once we put just enough structure around him to allow him to have these teams and pursue these innovations, he delivered over 30 major innovations in the next 3 years for that organization. And these were big things. They were fully baked out. I mean, it's an incredible number for any individual. To this day, it strikes me as some sort of a world record for an individual to lead that many innovations, significant innovations for an organization. And again, to your point, so many of those things happen under the radar. And I'm curious, is to a certain extent, do you create a mechanism for individuals like the one I just described to identify, pursue, and implement those innovations more locally when you do this deployment in organizations?
Yes, I call it funnels. So we typically work with push and pull funnels. And one extremely important part of that is actually to reach out to these kind of hidden radical pockets and provide them with the means to try and develop. And normally the budget is very small, if there even is a budget. And you can pick it up on the radar and you can identify things across the board and circling big ideas. And then you can be quite certain that you know how to go ahead. And you can also look back to the people and ask them, would you like to be a part of a central team now or a decentralized team to really take this to the market? So yes, that's a very important part to create an infrastructure.
That's terrific. Magnus, we are out of time right now. I can speak with you all day long about these topics. You're doing such important work in leadership in the world. So we're so grateful for you to take the time to share that wisdom with our global audience today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Then take care, my friend. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you, Magnus.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Magnus Penker directly from Stockholm, Sweden, to our global audience. One of the greatest global leaders of innovation, and with us, and wonderful presentation. I am honored. I'm gonna wrap up the session with you now. We're gonna close it down, and we're gonna start up at the top of the hour. And I'm honored to follow up on his footsteps, because at the top of the hour, I am going to build on what he has just shared with you. We're going to have a session on IT infrastructure and cloud strategies, and specifically with a focus on how great enduring organizations build value creation cultures. We're going to go deeper into culture. We're going to go deeper into an empirical review of great enduring organizations, not organizations that we have just collaborated with, organizations that we have led from within to transform the organization, not only digitally, not only the business, but the culture of those organizations. So a lot of the concepts that you have heard already from Magnus will be, you feel and see and hear them in my talk with you when I share the benchmark of great enduring organizations. So I look forward to meet you back up at the top of the hour where we are going to cover how great enduring organizations build value creation cultures. And that includes, of course, the IT infrastructure and cloud strategies as part of that culture. So see you at the top of the hour.